I am live. Let's see how long it takes it to get over to the live screen. Hey, there's Chris. I didn't know if he'd make it today or not. Hang on a minute. All right, do you see me?
Yeah, I've seen you.
Hey, Chris, I didn't see you. I was talking to my wife. She was trying to find it on her TV.
Oh, I know. I was listening backstage.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, baby. I'm gonna shut the phone off.
Soggy there?
Yeah, it's raining.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Bye.
How you feeling this morning, bud?
Little nauseated. Other than that, I'm feeling okay.
Well, you tell me when you need to go.
I sure will.
It's not a problem at all.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm hurting a little bit this morning, but that's been kind of going on for a few days now. My hips.
Therapy going okay?
Yeah, therapy's going good. Let me say hi to a couple people. Hey, Carol, good to see you. And Adventures by D, good morning. I was just telling Carol I had seen you guys doing a Dollywood live stream, I guess yesterday. Well, I didn't catch it live. Actually, I picked it up on the replay, but I thought that was interesting. I don't think I had run into you guys before, but I'm not positive. I meant to look. I hadn't had a chance yet. I was going to look at my subscriber list and see if I already had you on there, but I'm not positive. But I'll have to check out some more of your stuff. Since you're in Atlanta, who knows? Maybe someday we can do something together. And folks, we have our esteemed guest with us today, Chris, otherwise known as Blue Nose 352. He's going to be on screen. He's going to be audio will be on stream.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. See, I can't remember your names. I'm talking Adventures by D. I can't remember who's who. I saw them, and Carol told me. I guess it's Dave. I can't remember your wife's name. I'll get that. Dave and Chris. Well, welcome, Dave and Chris, to my little Saturday morning coffee show, if you want to call it that. What this amounts to is a hillbilly that talks about everything pretty much. But, and Chris is in here with us today. Chris and I have a common interest in aviation, particularly old stuff, antique planes, warbirds in particular, with Chris especially. I used to be in that line of business and until the mid 90s and kind of got out of it then and went on to do something else, but still like them. Hey, Dean. Good morning, Mr. Fall the Happy.
Yeah, we have a few common interests. We do.
We do.
Aviation is our big one. Animals is another.
Yeah. True.
And Disney.
Yeah, that's true too. Probably more than that if we sit down and add them up. But
I know.
Yeah, I just saw Disney's getting ready to run I thought about you the other night. Disney's getting ready to run I guess it's a Nat Geo thing, but they're going to, or maybe I'm not sure about that, but they're going to do a whole thing about whales. I think it's a 6-part series, and of course, a couple of them are going to be about orcas, but they're going to, be swimming with all kinds of them actually.
I saw a brief preview on where one of the divers, one of the cameramen, he was talking about swimming with orcas in New Zealand, and it looks like it's going to be a good series.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. Chris, some of you probably don't know this or might not have heard Chris talk about it, but last year he had hoped to go to Norway and actually get to swim with orcas, and hadn't happened yet. COVID kind of got in the way of that, among other things, but hopefully he'll get to do that someday. That I think that'd be a great experience.
Yeah, hopefully fall of 2022 I'll head out to Norway and It'll be a little warmer than January.
Is Norway better to go to than like you said, New Zealand? Or are there
Well,
more opportunities up there? Maybe
it's sort of a guarantee that you'll find orca around between October and March because they
okay,
go up there for the feeding season. A lot of the herring swim uh, up north,
right.
and you'll see multiple pods of orca. So it's a guarantee that you'll definitely go swimming or snorkeling with them.
And turn my phone down. Sorry, guys. Yeah,
Them
that's
and humpback whales too.
yeah. That's what I was going to say. A lot of people don't realize how important the Arctic area is.
Yep.
Maybe the Antarctic too. I'm not 100% sure about that. It would make sense, but how important those are for feeding as far as the large sea mammals go, whales and dolphins, or I don't know about dolphins, but orcas and big whales and of course belugas and that sort of thing.
Yep.
Hey, Billy. Good morning, ma'am. Good to see you. I've been fascinated by this silver lab thing you talked about yesterday. I just want you to know that. I had to look that up, and they were beautiful. There seems to be a little bit of controversy about folks that are trying to breed them consistently. Of course, they're always going to have that when you've got other people who, think there's only 3 colors instead of 4. But I just wonder how they are doing that. If that's a recessive gene, and it could be detrimental to them in the long run. But man, they are pretty. My understanding is they're very expensive too. People want to pay for that. Start to say oddity. It's not that something unique like that. I've never seen one, so I thought that was really curious. I don't know if you saw that. I don't know when we were talking about that, Chris, but we were talking about people having labs, and I guess it was last night in chat something, and there's black labs and chocolate labs, and I've seen yellow labs, which are some of them are almost white actually, but there's also a silver Labrador, and I'd never seen one.
Yeah, I always thought that they were chocolate, black, or yellow.
Yeah, that's me too. That's all I've ever seen. Apparently, this is something kind of new, or I guess they've been around, but they're just very rare that they happen.
Oh, wow.
And normally, I would say in nature, normal breeding, but apparently there maybe some breeders are trying to breed for that. They're trying to, have litters of silver labs so they can sell them for big bucks, I guess, which is probably not the right reason, but I'd never heard of it until last night.
I wonder if they would use like some sort of artificial insemination to.
I don't know. They might. It's hard to say these days. I mean, if there's enough money in it, somebody will figure out some way to do it.
Right.
And but it's like a lot of other things that reptile breeders will breed for albinism or albinos, which is probably better than them taking them out of the wild. But even then, you're breeding for certainly not the better of the species, because albinism is usually a death sentence if they actually are in the wild. They won't survive that way because they're too obvious.
Right. Yeah,
they stand out.
Very difficult for them to hunt.
Yes.
So it's the same way with lions.
Yeah.
You have white lions, which a lot of them end up in some sort of sanctuary in South Africa. But there's still wild ones that they tend to stay behind. And when the pride goes and hunts for their prey, and once they get it, I mean, sometimes it's every lion for themselves, but they understand that there are white lions amongst the pride, and they will actually allow them to have a little bit of the whatever prey that they caught, whatever prey they hunted.
Yeah, that's true. I've seen that they're pretty rare too, I think. And of course there's white tigers and stuff. I mean, there's albinism in just about everything out there, and it's they don't as far as health of the species goes, that's generally not a good thing. if
Right.
it got too common. So I guess that might be one of the concerns about these dogs. If they're breeding for that kind of a recessive gene in the long run, you might end up damaging the species or damaging the bloodlines. But we'll see. If they sure are pretty, I know that. And Billy showed them to us last night, so that was really interesting.
I
So
don't think
far,
I've ever seen a picture of one yet.
I never had either till last night. I looked them up. So, and apparently, yeah, she says she hasn't seen a real one, but she's seen pictures too. But I'd never even heard of them before.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the lab is another one of my favorites. You know, the Beagle and the Alaskan Malamute are two of my favorite dogs, two of my favorite breeds. And the lab is up there also. The lab, it's funny, they're full of energy, and they just like anybody and everybody who walks up to them.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't think I've ever, well, I'm sure there are bad labs, but most labs are really smart. And a friend of mine used to have a chocolate lab that would go down and meet the UPS guy and bring the packages up every day for him. And he learned that on his own, actually. He just started doing it. And of course, once he got started, Joe would send him, but he started it on his own. He would just go down there and wait on the guy when he'd hear him coming up the driveway.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I love it when
Looks like Billy. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say I like it when you walk up to them and that tail is just going.
Yeah.
It never stops, and then their ears go back, and they're just like, "Oh, pet me, pet me, pet me. Good to see you." You know.
Oh yeah. We used to have I had a Siberian Husky for a while. It was kind of like that. He was friendly. He might have looked like a wolf, but he was friendly. He wouldn't hurt a fly. He might hurt a cat, unfortunately, but he wouldn't hurt anything else. He was.
Thank you, Billy.
He was always ready to, he'd come to the door and he wasn't going to scare you away. He'd probably open the door for you if he could, because he was always ready to see somebody.
Yeah, wow.
Look, like Billy sent you a picture of a silver lab, Chris, to Instagram.
Yep.
Take a look at it when you get a chance there and you'll see.
Thank you, Billy.
I've been exploring around on YouTube lately, and I found some there's always interesting stuff, but I found a website just in the last or a page or a site, whatever, somebody's YouTube page, and they talk about Appalachian people, which I consider myself one of, and how we talk and where the language comes from and all the different words that Appalachian people are known for using for different things. It's really interesting. I was just listening to it before the show started this morning and trying to write down some things that I said a couple of things here a week or two ago about. It might have been on Lynn's show, actually. I've mentioned a jot 'em down store, and nobody knew what I was talking about. That's what my mom used to call a little country store up the road, was a jot 'em down store. Because if you didn't have money, they'd jot it down in a pad or in a ledger, and you'd pay at the end of the month or whatever, and or when the crops came in or whatever you were doing, and that was
like a credit or
yeah, it was, but that's just what they called it. They'd give them credit for stuff, and they'd write it down so they knew what they owed, and then they'd pay it when they had the money. But they mentioned a bunch of other stuff that I used to grow up hearing all the time. But one I had never heard of, and I wrote it down this morning, was a tooth jumper.
I heard you talking about that. I didn't want to mention it, but I heard you talking about it, and I thought, wow, that's interesting.
It was, I'll tell you what it is just a minute. Hey, well, you know what it is, but I'll tell everybody else. Hey, good morning, Jay Nashville. Good to see you. Welcome. Pour you a cup of coffee or something, whatever you're drinking this morning. I don't judge. It could be harder than that. It's fine. Now, a tooth jumper, in case anybody else doesn't know and cares to find out, was back up in the mountains in places where they didn't have dentists or didn't have them on a regular basis. There were people, and I'm going to guess they could probably be male or female, that were supposedly good at removing a bad tooth that was hurting somebody or, giving them problems. But what they would do, they used a hammer and a chisel or a nail, and they get that up under the tooth and pop it with a hammer and just knock it right out.
Make that
So
tooth
they
jump.
said. And I've never heard of that. I mean, I've heard of people pulling teeth with pliers and that sort of thing, but I've never heard of a tooth jumper. And that was, I thought that was it. Honestly, I think if somebody was good at it, it'd probably be easier than pulling on it with pliers, to be honest. It probably would come out quicker. I don't think it would hurt any less, but I think it would come out quicker. That's gross, Jay said. Well, it's gross, but people did what they had to do.
Make that tooth jump.
Yeah, make that tooth jump. But I had never heard of that one. That was a brand new one on me. They were, this lady and her daughter were doing this. This lady's written some books about this sort of thing. She has either another website or something called the Blind Pig and the Acorn, which was another old saying we had growing up, was even a blind sow or even a blind hog finds an acorn once in a while. So I don't know if it's about that, but she apparently studied this Appalachian language thing, and she had 4 or 5 different dictionaries, and that's all they had in them. They were written by different professors and college types who had studied the language and had written down all these unique sayings and words that people in the Appalachians still use or did use. And a lot of them came over from the old world, actually, Scotland, and especially the Scots-Irish in this part of the country. They settled a lot in the mountains and brought a lot of that stuff with them. I've always been told, and she mentioned that too.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, it's, like the word gom. To me, that's a word I've used most of my life, and it basically means you gom up something, or something's all gommed up. It's mucky, it's full of dirt, or it's full of grease or mud, or something that mucked up and doesn't work right. It's all gommed up. But that's not a word you hear everybody say.
Yeah, I think it's sort of kind of went to like gum,
Yeah, probably. Or it may have come from that. I don't know. It's hard to say where some of this came from when you get up in the mountains. I mean,
well, and I'm sure. I mean, I've heard other A&P mechanics say that the engine's all gummed up, or something is all gummed up and it needs to be fixed, and
That's funny. It just depends on where you grow up, I guess. But a lot of that stuff I used to, I've said most of my life or heard people say it and didn't really think much about it until you get out someplace and you say something, people laugh at you or they think it's funny or unique. And, I just figured everybody said it. So good morning, Passhole Repair. Which one do we have? Is that Mike or Val this morning? And Daniel, good to see you, buddy. You're up and about this morning early. And who else? Just somebody else I thought popped in here.
Let's see. Jay is here.
Yeah,
good morning, Jay. Good morning, Carol.
Yep, Carol she might have been the first one in this morning. She caught a big boo-boo. I caught a boo-boo on my website on this link this morning, and I about messed the things up. I had created this link and this today's stream in a different place, and I had not linked it to StreamYard, so I wouldn't have been able to get in here with you, Chris, for example. I'm not even sure I could have got in. I couldn't have got in personally. I've just been in chat with everybody else, I guess. But I caught it in time and I fixed it. But then as soon as I did, she sent me a note and said, "Oh, your link don't work." So I had sent out a new link, and fortunately, it's evidently working. So that is a good thing.
That is.
Oops, now I'm way behind. Oh, got you both. Good. Mike and Val. Good deal. Glad to see you in. Is it whiskey this morning, Mike, or is it coffee? I mean, you don't have to say if you don't want to, but just asking.
A bit of both.
A bit of both. It could be that too. I've been known to have Irish coffee for morning coffee, breakfast, or chats. I don't know. I know there's several people here from Michigan. I know there's some. I don't know where everybody else is from. I think Mike and Val are in Florida. I don't know if that's where they came from. Jay's in Virginia. So what's something that you guys might, Adventures by D, I think, are in Georgia. Did you guys grow up with unusual sayings that you just didn't hear when you moved out or left home or got away with stuff? You know what, Mike, I understand that. I used to work with a guy that was in the Navy, and he always, his comeback for that was always, hey, it's noon somewhere. And he said, I'd probably been there since he'd been nearly around the world on a ship. So, and he was probably right. Couldn't argue with his logic anyway.
That's true. It's just like everyone says, hey, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
That's right. 5 o'clock somewhere. I don't know if you guys, I'll take a minute, back up here a minute and do a little bit better job. I don't know if everybody here knows Chris, Blue Nose in chats and stuff. He's been around at least as long as I have, probably longer than I've been here online, I mean, and doing, talking in chats. But Chris has a keen interest in warbirds, airplanes from World War II and that era, and has actually worked on some and flown in some, which is, I've worked on a few things, but I haven't flown in much like that. Not anything real fast and powerful. But Chris, tell them just a little bit about your background, how you got started in aviation, or what got your interest going.
Well,
if you feel like it.
I can remember as far back as 3 years old.
Wow.
Lived near O'Hare Airport, maybe a few miles away. So that was a really big interest.
Yeah.
My distant cousin, probably one of the more famous people in my family, a distant cousin of mine is Chuck Yeager.
Right. That's impressive.
He was my great-grandfather, and they looked like twins. And they grew up together in West Virginia.
In case some of you don't know, Chuck Yeager was a famous World War II pilot who also became he was career. I don't know if he ever left the Air Force. I mean, he ended up coming up in ranks from, I guess, promoted up from he wasn't I guess he was an officer. He was flying, but didn't he start out as an enlisted man and then worked his way up? I'm not sure about that. But
he didn't go to. I know he didn't go to college, or if I remember right, he started college, but he didn't quite finish. He still ended up becoming a second lieutenant, and then worked his way up. By the time he retired, he was a brigadier general.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was in the Air Force pretty much.
He was the first man to break the sound barrier too. In case I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie The Right Stuff, but he was one of the main characters. He was the main character in that movie who wasn't an astronaut.
What's funny is he was actually in the movie, and he played a bartender in the movie.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, he was. Oh, my brain is not working this morning. He was a bartender at. I can't remember the name of her bar.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
It's pretty much where all the pilots hung out. A lot of the test pilots, they all hung out. So he played a bartender there, and it's funny because the actor who was playing Chuck Yeager was standing right by him, and he's actually standing right behind him. And
that is cool. I don't know if I remembered that, realized that or not, but that was one of my favorite movies. So I just, I've read a book or two about him, or I don't know if he wrote an autobiography or not, or somebody may have co-written one with him, but I've got at least one book about him on my bookshelf. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah. You're related to Chuck Yeager. It don't get much better than that.
My grandfather on my mother's side was in the Air Force. My uncle was in the Air Force. My father was in the Air Force. My father is a pilot. My aunt was in the Air Force. So yeah, kind of a big Air Force, big aviation family. I can remember as far back as 3 years old, loving aviation. I remember on my third birthday getting this little metal airplane. I think a 747. And beyond that, just growing up around aviation. On my seventh birthday, my father, he was a pilot by then. On my seventh birthday, I actually sat in the left seat of a Cherokee 140 or a Piper 140. And that was a lot of fun.
I can imagine.
Getting on the radio, calling for base and then final, giving the end number and everything. So beyond that, I think when I started to really like warbirds, I was 10 years old. Also at 7, I should go back. At 7, it was my first time going to Oshkosh, Wisconsin. If anybody had noticed the big air show that was happening in Florida a week ago, Sun and Fun. Sun and Fun is like a runner-up to Oshkosh. Oshkosh is worldwide, probably one of the most famous, well-known air shows and conventions. And it lasts a week long. My love of warbirds, it just kept growing and growing. By the time I was 18, I had joined warbirds and EAA. EAA is the Experimental Aircraft Association. They're in charge of Oshkosh. They're in charge of the convention up at Oshkosh. I became a Warbird, an EAA Warbirds of America member. I started flying in my first Warbird flight was in a B-25 named Barbie 3. I had posted a picture on Instagram. So she's she's kind of my aviation love of my life. Took care of her for 7 years. We had a couple of AMPs to kind of look over everything.
Yeah, you actually worked crew on that, and you didn't just get to fly on it, but you worked on it, right?
We did, yes. It's sort of a work hard, play hard type people.
Yeah, that's true.
She required a lot of maintenance, so but it was a lot of fun. Bringing her out to shows and then talking about her background. Meeting a lot of veterans. I've met so many B-25 veterans from World War II. It was incredible.
Was she in the war?
No, she stayed here. The real Barbie 3 did, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's why she was painted up as one. But she was more of a test aircraft and then went on to a training aircraft. But then she went back to testing during the 1950s on radar and on into the 1960s on radar. So she had a 75 millimeter cannon in her nose when she was made.
Wow.
And 4 50 caliber machine guns in the nose. So she was a beast. But they took that nose off and they had put on a regular nose for, say, an F-111, also an F-101 to test radar.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
and just to inform, those are both. Well, at the time, I would say cutting edge jet airplanes. Far cry from an early B-25, which was a twin engine radial airplane built in the 40s.
Yep.
So that's been. I'd like to have seen one of those with an F-111 nose on it.
And we actually we kept her nose in the or the other nose in the hangar.
The original nose.
Well, the original nose is back on her, but the test nose of the F-101 we kept
Okay.
in the hangar. And
well, that's pretty pointy too, as I recall, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I got when they found her, she was on a farm in Plainfield, Illinois, just kind of sitting out in the open with quite a few other aircraft. They fixed her up, basically did sort of a rough restoration to the point where they could ferry her to one airport. She had a couple of issues, fixed her up again, and then ferried her to Rockford, Illinois. And then they did a complete restoration on her.
Oh, wow.
I joined probably 2 years after her first flight. I joined the what we were called the Weary Warriors. And I think I was probably one of the youngest to join, because everyone that I worked with, they all looked at me like, okay, you were born in 1980. We were all born in like the 40s and 50s. Yeah, you're the youngest one here. Here's a mop. You start out with mopping the floor around here, and then wipe down the plane, and then we'll move you up.
You're the guy they sent after the prop wash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wipe the oil off the nacelle, and yeah.
Yeah.
So
good morning, Mike Wheeler. I didn't mean to overlook you, buddy. I just was waiting for a moment there to give you a shout. Thanks for coming in. Good to see you. How you feeling this morning? I think you got your shot yesterday, your first one. So hopefully that's still doing well for you. I didn't get to work on this airplane, but I don't know. It's probably been 20 years ago now. God, it doesn't seem possible. And this was on National Geographic, I think, did a special on this airplane. Back during the war, to ferry airplanes from the United States to Europe, they flew them across Greenland and usually Iceland and over to Ireland and then on into England or France or wherever they took them. Well, mostly Britain at that time.
Yep.
But they flew them into Greenland, and they had U.S. Air Force had a base up there, and that's where they would refuel, so they can make it across the pond and make that loop. And somewhere during one of those ferry programs, some oh God, help me, P-38 Lightnings went down, which was a twin-engine, twin-tail fighter aircraft that the United States flew during World War II. And they went down, and as it turned out, they were never able to go back and recover those airplanes. They just sat there on the ice and the tundra until eventually they disappeared.
And a few B-17s as well.
Yeah, and some others. Yeah, I think there's probably quite a few. I even think I read the story about a C-130 that got parked up there one time and got buried in the snow. But over a course of about 40 years, these P-38s got crushed, and the snow kept piling up, and they kept moving down inside the glacier, basically. And these guys got the idea that they would like to go in and try to rescue what they could find. And in the end, they got one whole airplane out. I don't know if they got some parts maybe off some of the others. They were pretty much crushed. I mean, the way you can imagine that many years of ice and snow on them, they were pretty much crushed. But the guy that did it, or one of the guys that did it, invented this machine to drill down through the ice. He used hot water to do the drilling. And it was just kind of like a great big huge fire hose, and they somehow used that to drill down. And that way, when they hit the airplane or the pieces, it didn't damage it. They just, kind of melted the ice off of it. Right. And it took them a good while to get them down, but they brought that airplane. Eventually, the airplane ended up in Middlesboro, Kentucky, which is just, 50 miles from here or so. And we went up. My friend, do what?
pretty much a stone's throw from you.
Yeah, it's not very far. It's just over the mountain. And a friend of mine and I went up there and looked at it when they were building it, putting it together. And had I known about it sooner, I might have gone up there and tried to, get in on driving some rivets in that thing, because they had to do a lot of work on it.
Oh, yes.
But we also went up there the day they flew it, which was it hadn't flown since 1944 or something, whenever it was ferried over and landed and on the ice up there. And so the day they actually put it together and flew it, we went up and watched them fly it for the first time. And they called that airplane the Glacier Queen, or Glacier Girl, excuse me.
Glacier Girl, yep.
And I used to have a coffee cup of it and some other stuff, and my coffee cup got broken at work. The handle got broken off of it. But anyway, it was a really interesting story. I would like to have gotten in on working on that a little bit more. I would love to have had a chance to fly in something like that. I don't know if they put 2 seats in this one or not, but I mean, that's basically a single seat airplane. But I know they did have some 2-seaters.
They did on a couple, which it looked pretty strange, but a lot of them, they kept just the single seat, and then the trainer would kind of crawl in behind the student pilot, and right in the canopy. He would just kind of crawl in a crouched position, all stuffed in right behind the pilot, right up against the canopy.
Well, it would be a tight fit because it's not a real big fuselage.
Yep. A lot of the original parts are on Glacier Girl, including the the original 50 caliber machine guns and the 20 millimeter cannon in the nose.
Right. They're deactivated, but they're there.
They are. They are. Yes.
They can't come by your house and strafe you, but they sure look mean.
Right.
I don't know. Do you know where that airplane is now, Mike? Because it left this area and moved. Somebody else took it somewhere else.
Well, his name is, my brain is not working. It's down in Texas.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. There was some controversy about the guy who had it up here. Actually, there was actually another guy started the search for it, and somehow this guy in Kentucky got involved. I think he put in a lot of money into it, maybe to help him get it. And then in the end, he kind of claimed it. So there was some controversy about that, but I didn't care about that part. I just wanted to see it fly again. So it finally did that. It was a neat thing.
They also tried to recover. There was a B-29 up there called Keybird. After the war, they used B-29s. This was in between the war and, I would say, when the Cold War started. And we used B-29s to sort of fly around the border of Russia. We had to make an emergency landing on Greenland, and that B-29 was stuck there until the 1990s. Pretty much all in one piece. They brought up, this crew brought up 4 brand new R3350 engines, overhauled props. They installed brand new batteries. They put in brand new instruments, had it all ready to go. And all of a sudden, the auxiliary power unit caught fire.
Uh-oh.
They were getting ready to take off. Everything was started, and the power unit caught fire, and then the plane caught fire. And the crew had to get out. They couldn't put the fire out, and the B-29 fell apart. It didn't completely burn, but it just fell apart, and they couldn't recover because they were sitting on a lake.
Yeah.
So it's still up there. It's just in a bunch of pieces now.
I'm sure if it got hot, most of the skin's probably ruined. So.
Oh yeah.
The metal would have to all be replaced now.
If it could be recovered still, it would be a sort of a restoration / rebuild. The other warbird that I fly on, I'm sure everybody has seen the TBM Avenger that made that emergency landing in Cocoa Beach.
Yeah, it landed just off the beach the other day.
Yep. I fly on a TBM Avenger as a crew member, and I work on the TBM from time to time. So,
which is a pretty neat airplane in itself.
It really is a lot of fun. It is.
It's a really big airplane for what you might think of. Those things, sometimes they surprise me, the size of them. That was a pretty good sized bird for that time period.
The wing area is so large, and that's why it was very useful in World War II. You could put a 2,000-pound torpedo on this thing, and it'll jump off of the carrier deck with no problem. We have a 3,000-foot runway, and granted, we're not carrying 2,000 pounds, but the TBM fully loaded, full fuel and 4 crew members. It could take us. We could jump off a little less than 1,000 feet.
Oh, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Interesting. Anybody out there? I mean, I don't mean to be ignoring the chat members, or if you have a question for Mike or me, and we can veer off to another subject now if you'd like, or anytime you'd like. But if you have a question about some of Chris's aviation experiences or things he's done, if he's up to it, I'll leave that up to him. But if he feels like it, then I'm sure he'd be glad to answer your questions.
Oh yes.
Carol, are you still in the chat? I saw her name a minute ago, but I don't know if she's actually out there. I was going to get her friend for her if she was.
I talked to.
Shoot, am I the only one in here?
I know she was talking about Kalamazoo.
Was she talking about that today? I missed that.
No. She's at a red light.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, you can't see Teddy then. If you get to a place, Carol, where you can see the screen, let me know and I'll get Teddy up. He's shirking his duties lately. I gave him my old chair. I got a new chair to sit in. Hopefully was hoping it would help my back a little bit more. And it has. It's just my hips are still bothering me. But anyway, so I gave him my old chair and he won't get out of it now. He thinks that's his chair and that's where he's supposed to stay. So, that's about all I can do with him. Yeah, but
he's comfortable.
Oh, he is that. He sleeps is one of the best things he can do. I'll tell you that right now. He is an expert sleeper. The only time he wakes up is to go to the bathroom, eat a bite, or crawl up on top of me and lay in my face or something. That's about. If I get up and go to lay down on the couch for a little while, he has to come over and lay on me. Now, not for very long, just long enough to make me uncomfortable. And when he weighs about 20 pounds, and when he puts his paws on my chest, he feels like he's pushing all the way through. But
so he's like a lion.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
expert sleeper.
Yeah, my co-host got his own chair. Now you don't want to work to earn it. I may have to take it away from him. I mean, I get him a pair of headphones and a microphone, and he just sleeps the whole thing. Oh, cool, Mike. I will look at that. That's interesting. I think I had several kin that were in either the First World War or the Second one, but I don't think most of them were Army infantry types. I don't think they worked on airplanes, anything cool. The closest I've been to flying something like that was I worked, and I was still in high school or just getting out of high school, and I helped a guy restore or finish putting together a PT-17 Boeing Stearman, which was a trainer. It was a 2-seat open cockpit trainer that was used between the wars and up to World War II. pretty famous trainer. It was very strong and not aerodynamic, but somewhat acrobatic. They fly a lot of them in acrobatic shows today with bigger engines on them, or some. I don't say a lot, but quite a few. And they were crop dusters for a long time. And this one that we had or worked on, it wasn't mine. I say that like it was mine, but it wasn't. Had never been a crop duster. So at the time, that seemed like a really big deal and a find. And it was a barn find, if you want to call it that. And
That is a B-17G without the chin turret, Mike. Yeah, that's a pretty cool.
Oh, you've looked at it. Oh, okay.
Yep. There's not too many of those today.
Hey, Pearl, are you just showing up? Are you? Hopefully everything's okay. I see the crisis managed part. Oh, okay. All right. Well, hang in there. If you get through, come back. We'll probably be hanging around for a while, or I will be.
Morning, Pearl.
But this and the guy that I used to fly with, he had at one time he had either a PT-19 or a PT-23, and I'm not sure now which one it was, but it was also a low wing, single wing though monoplane trainer from pre-war. I guess I don't know if they might have still been training people basics and those kind of planes, but with stuff had advanced so much at the first of the war that they moved up pretty quick into much more sophisticated airplanes to train and learn to fly.
Yeah, they did. I know you were talking about the crop dusters, and that's how a majority of the Stearmans still fly today, because so many of them were crop dusters. They weren't scrapped. So it's nice to have them around. Well,
they were built like, pardon the expression, but they were built like tanks. I mean, they were very strongly built and well put together. I always heard, well, this is true. I've never researched this to be absolutely sure, but I was always told that no Stearman ever broke apart, at least in the early days, ever broke apart from aerobatics or anything. They just never, didn't fold wings up on them, or, nothing fell off because of G forces and that sort of thing, which wasn't such a far cry back then. That was not something that was totally unheard of. I'm reading a book right now about World War I and a fighter pilot, and I'll have to find his name, but this guy flew, started out flying Sopwith pups over the trenches, the front, if you will, during World War I. And if you're familiar with any of that history, it's basically the French and the English faced off against the Germans and they were just trenches shooting at each other. It was a horrible war. I mean, not that all war's not, but this guy was flying a Sopwith pup, and he talks a lot about how fragile they were, or how fragile they were told they were. And he said it would stand more than you'd think, but they did fold up sometimes. And planes back then were built much different than today, mostly wood and covered in fabric, and literally. And but I was amazed at how little training most of them got at that time. Most pilots, he said, that came over from England had 20 to 40 hours, and they were turned loose and sent over there to fight. Most of them could barely fly, much less dogfight in the air. And in his case, he got lucky because he broke his leg in training at some point. So he ended up staying in England longer, and he ended up getting about twice as many hours as most of the people he flew with had. So that helped him out quite a bit. And he obviously survived the war. He wrote about it. I think he retired after World War II, in fact, but it was amazing to me how little training they got. And of course, a lot of them died in training. They didn't really teach them how to fly that well, and they crashed planes in training. It was a whole different world then.
Yeah, it was the same during World War II as well, because there were new aircraft coming out. They would start out in like a P-47, and when the P-51 came out, they would get maybe 10 hours of training, or in some cases 5 hours of training, because they were desperate for pilots and then they were sent out.
There he is, Carol. I'm not sure he's going to stay much longer. Nope. He wanted down. He wasn't happy. He was in the middle of a nap when I picked him up. So, but he said hi back. I'm sure he did. Rotten. Hi, Tina. I meant to say hi. Good to see you this morning. No, Pearl, nothing sounds like a Stearman. You're right, especially the ones that you see in air shows today, because most the Stearman we had, or that I flew in, had a what did it have for an engine? I think it had a Wright. I can't remember which size, but it was only like 225 horsepower or something like that, which was fine. I mean, that was all it needed for a trainer. But most of them nowadays have at least a 450 in them, a 450 horsepower. The ones they fly for aerobatics, and probably the Dusters too. I don't know. A lot of them have 985s on the nose, and
yep.
They have at least twice the horsepower.
Is that Pratt and Whitney? If I remember.
Yeah, it's Pratt and Whitney. I can't remember what they called it. It might have been a Wasp Junior or something, but it was 985. Yep. Same engines that. There was a lot of other stuff had it, but Twin Beach, the early Beach 18s, which was one of Beach's early twin engine planes, had those engines on it. And
I was just reading about the 1931 racer called the Super Solution. It was a biplane, green and yellow. It was not a Reno racer, similar to. I mean, they did the same races, but I don't think it was the Reno at that time. It was like a cross country racer, or they would have different tracks across the country. And it had a similar engine to the 985. I think it was called SP2 or something. I can't remember. Really interesting aircraft, about the size of the GB.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
What did you call it?
It was the layered Super Solution.
Super Solution. I'll look that up. Yeah, I don't know if how many of you remember the movie Rocketeer, Disney movie. About the guy who found the jetpack and was flying it, and I guess late 1930s was the time, early 40s was the time period, right about World War II started, but was that time. But he was trying to get this guy that was the star of the movie was trying to get into some of the air races, and they built a GB, which was if you remember the airplane that Howard Hughes gave him in the movie, right at the end of the movie, that's what we're talking about, was a GB. It was kind of an all motor, short little wings and a big fuselage full of fuel, and a tail that wasn't quite big enough, and very a lot of motor.
Unstable.
Yeah, very unstable. Most of the ones that flew crashed, and not that many of them, I guess, were ever built, but they were very fast, and that was something. Yeah, they were, I guess, somewhat sought after. I was just reading about them too. I always kind of wondered about them, but
Jimmy Doolittle was a test pilot.
He was, yes, he was. That's right. It was, a lot of those guys that went on, and I don't know, I don't think Yeager did, but a lot of the World War I pilots that survived the war came back to this country and looking for jobs to. If they could, to fly. So a lot of them flew airmail.
Yep.
There's great books about some of that kind of stuff. And some of them did what they call barnstorming, which is the forerunner to the air shows we have today. They were kind of informal usually. And, guys would hop around the country, literally landed in people's or hay fields. And they'd go around town and put up signs and say, free airplane rides, or not free airplane rides, but airplane rides for $1 or $5 or whatever. And they'd make a few dollars and pay for fuel and fly on to the next town, and that kind of stuff. And they were called barnstormers. And then some of those guys went on to fly again in World War II.
In World War II, yep. Yeah, and actually the ones who, at the time when they were children, a lot of the World War II pilots, when they were children, that's how they were interested in aviation. From getting a ride in
exactly.
Say one of the biplanes, a Jenny. Normally they would take like a Jenny around and give uh, uh, flights and put on just small little get-togethers, little air shows, and do some sort of aerobatics, and people got a kick out of that. People love
Yes, yes, I am Pearl Manhattan. How'd you know that he did? I was just thinking about that because one of his books, and I can't remember the complete title. It was something about the Messiah. Was a barnstorming book, and he actually wrote a couple of different stories about barnstorming. Yeah, I've read quite a few of his books actually. His early books were my favorites. And in case you didn't, if you guys didn't see, I was talking about Richard Bach. He wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which is actually a pretty interesting book if you've ever read it. It was all about a seagull who loved to fly, not just because he could, but because he loved to fly. And so it's pretty interesting. It tells of a reluctant Messiah. That's it. That was pretty good. That was a pretty good read, I must admit. One of his favorite books of mine was called A Gift of Wings, and it was a series of short stories that he had written, I guess, for one of the flying magazines in the 50s or 60s. And I thought those were really good stories, too.
Morning, Tina. Good morning, Shelley.
Hey, thanks, Mike and Val, for coming in. Good to see you always. And you're welcome anytime. Just come on in and pull up a chair and spin a yarn. And Shelley, I meant to say hi to you a few minutes ago. Hopefully you're still there and can hear me. Good morning, ma'am. Illusions, Adventures. Okay, that's it. Yeah, Illusions. That was right. He got into some kind of more, I don't know he got into some stuff that was a little bit out there.
I don't know why, but I always want to say Shelley Star Wars. It sticks in my head. I don't know why.
I suddenly had somebody else talking in my ear, and I just figured out why. Somebody else popped online. I guess I had the stream open. Sorry about that. I guess nobody else heard it from me. So, but anyway, metaphysical. Hey, there you go, Pearl. That's the best. That's a better word. He got into more metaphysical stuff, which was kind of different. I mean, I wasn't as big a fan, but it was pretty good reading. It's pretty heavy, but his early stuff was fun, flying stuff. So I really liked it. Thanks, Pearl. I knew you'd pull me out of the fire. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, they were talking about going to the Upper Peninsula. I haven't flown in anything in quite a while, actually. I flew in a lot of business stuff when I was working in Nashville. Did a lot of test flying with pilots and as a mechanic, and I flew with some really good people, and I flew with some really bad people, pilots that, that's right, Pearl. Thank you, Pearl. I'll do the same for you someday. You fly with people long enough, you pick up on things, and
right.
And I flew with some good pilots, but I flew with a few, and very few, thank goodness, that I didn't want to get back in the airplane with them. But I flew with some guys that were just absolutely superb, and I'd go anywhere with them. And so you just kind of run the gamut. When I was still in aviation, I got to the point where I was just a moment. Excuse me, folks. I got to where I was kind of taking on the flight, doing a lot of the flight testing myself because I didn't want to ask other people to do it. And sometimes they volunteered to go, but I just didn't like to say, you go on this test flight, you go on this test flight. So I ended up doing a lot of test flights with people, and some of them, like I said, were kind of scary. But in the end, I think that kind of pushed me to get out of the business a little bit because that was just added pressure. I felt a lot of pressure in that job before I got out of it. I mean, I always believed I did good work, safe work, and my men did, and my crews did. And I really had a lot of faith in them, but still, you're taking people's lives in your hands to some degree, and that's probably sounds over dramatic, but it kind of built on me over time, and I think that's one of the reasons why when I did get laid off, I just decided to make a split and do something else for a while. But I still loved airplanes and still do, and probably always will.
Well, and that's one of the things. And I know you know this, to become an A&P mechanic, it's not like being a car mechanic. I mean, granted, you want the car to be safe. If a car accident happens, everything is on the ground. I'll just say that. When with an aircraft, you have to make sure that everything is 100%. You're signed off on everything, because essentially it's your airplane. Even though you're the mechanic, it's your airplane because you are in charge of the safety of that aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
The pilot is in charge of making sure that he or she is flying the aircraft the way that they're supposed to be flying the aircraft. But it's really the A&P mechanics aircraft. Like in World War II, they would tell a pilot, "Don't you hurt my airplane."
Yeah, right.
So they
took it pretty seriously, and
they did,
and we did, and we did too. I mean, that's the thing. I've probably run off a few mechanics that I didn't think they probably were safe enough, but they weren't as conscientious as I thought they should be. And I just didn't have a lot of use for some. I mean, I needed to know that somebody had their head in the game, and they had every, they were there for all the right reasons. And of course, when you're in that business too, and a lot of people don't know this, one of the reasons that airplanes cost a lot of money and parts are expensive and just things like that is because there's so much quality control goes into everything you do. I mean, when I worked, I never released anything that didn't have somebody else looking behind me at the same job I did and checking my work and making sure I didn't put something together backwards or forgot to safety wire something or make sure I torqued the nut on the wheel for the landing gear and that kind of stuff. And on airlines and stuff, there's usually even more than that goes on in the background, and parts for an airplane get looked at so many times it's not even funny, and they should. But that said, and that's a big difference between a car. I said you can coast and pull over the side of the road in a car, but in an airplane, you can't pull over on the next cloud to see what's dripping, and so it's different. That to scare anybody, because I think airplanes are safe and pretty wonderful and all that kind of stuff, but.
Tina, don't forget to let the dogs in.
How long do they need to stay out, Tina? I'll set a clock. I just saw, Tina's here, and I thought I just saw somebody else come in. Good morning, Tina, and welcome. You may have been here for a while and I missed you, but if that's the case, I apologize.
I'm going to say hi to Tina Squared.
Yeah, Tina Squared is here.
But yeah, you're right. And as far as warbirds, we are at the standard. The FAA wants us to be at the standard of airline maintenance, but a step higher as well.
Yeah. I mean, we had. I can honestly say that, or regretfully say that, I lost some good friends flying over the years that were corporate pilots for different companies. Fortunately, none of them were ever something we did. Most of them a couple of them were mid-air collisions. One of them was an engine failure on an airplane we didn't work on. It went right down out in front of us. It was pretty bad. He was a guy we'd known for years and all kind of liked him. And he went down right there on Nashville Airport. But, so it happens, and it did happen. But fortunately, not a lot of people I ever knew, and nobody really close to me. But, there's a whole world of stuff out there flying around that people don't even know. I mean, he used to fly. This probably doesn't happen much anymore, but when I first started out in airplanes or aviation and up till I quit, pretty much one of the biggest things going on at night was companies that flew checks. They flew canceled checks all over the country back to the Federal Reserve, either in Atlanta or Washington or wherever they had to go with them. That was a huge business. And every night about midnight, these planes would take off all over the country, going to different places to haul canceled checks. And it was a huge deal. And I don't know that happens so much anymore with computer aids and electronics transferring a lot of that kind of stuff. But that was a really big deal back in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s.
Oh, I bet.
There was a lot of contract. I mean, people would fight over those contracts. Unfortunately, they didn't all want to work on their airplanes. Fortunately, they weren't hauling passengers. They were just hauling checks. So, if it got a little squirrely, nobody cared but the pilot. And he was on his own there. But there was just a lot of that stuff out, a lot of stuff like that going on that people were bidding for and getting contracts for. And, I mean, that was a kind of a cutthroat world, really.
Tim, you really need to come up to Oshkosh with me one of these days.
I know, I do. I've wanted to go to Oshkosh since I was probably not as young as you. Well, I'm older than you, but probably not at 3. But since I was in high school, I've wanted to go to Oshkosh, and I've never made it. I'm trying to remember if I ever actually made it to Fun in the Sun, and I'm when I lived down there, I might have gone by there one time with my buddy that flew. But it wasn't quite as big back then as it is now. I mean, it's still not as big as Oshkosh, but it's obviously changed a lot since the 70s, and a lot more planes and a lot more going on. It's pretty neat down there. The air show link you sent me was pretty fascinating. I watched a couple days of work there. They did a pretty good job putting that on. I'm sure Oshkosh probably does too. I'll have to keep an eye out for that this year if they haven't. I'm sure they will.
I always try to describe Oshkosh to people, and when I mention camping, quite a few people say, I don't know about that. It's like, well, it's not the type of camping that you think it is. There's still showers, there's bathrooms, there's stores throughout the campgrounds everywhere, and you're camping on the airport property. So then you wake up in the morning and you could wake up to airplanes taking off at 6 o'clock in the morning, because that's when the departure times open. Now, when the arrival time opens, that's at 7 o'clock. So the sky is filled. Oshkosh ends up becoming the world's busiest airspace for a week.
For a week, yeah, I've always heard that. Pearl, that's interesting. Your did he ever? I mean, talk about a pressure job. You wouldn't want to not get payroll over to the guys fighting the battle. That's interesting that he flew the payroll over. I wonder what kind of money in those days, dollars, that he hauled back and forth. Or I guess they paid script back then, though. Maybe, I'm not sure about that. I know during some wartime they actually paid script that you could pay. You could get money, dollars for it, but I don't know if it was always in dollars. But I don't know if you could use script in Europe either, script or scrit or whatever they called it. I had I know what it was. Instagram this week, there was a guy. I'll shift gears just a little bit here for a minute. There was a guy had a picture of a cutaway. I don't know if you see those or not, Chris, but there's a guy that's got a Instagram site called Aviation Cutaways or something like that. Or
I think I follow him.
Cutaway Archives or something like that. And he had a cutaway of a Republic CB the other day, which was an amphibious float plane. If you guys ever saw the movie James Bond Man with the Golden Gun, they had a model airplane or whatever, but it looked like a Republic CB. And that's what it was. It had a lower fuselage. The engine was mounted as a pusher on the back top of the wing, and kind of interesting airplanes, somewhat underpowered, I guess. But anyway, this friend of mine had really gotten into CBs, and so he was going to Fun and Sun for years before he got sick, and that's what he was concentrating on, was trying to redo CBs. He was trying to find some, and he had some modifications that they were working on doing, and I was working on some, helping him out a little bit with it. They were trying to put modern engines in them, and actually putting a plug in the fuselage, so the fuselage was just a foot longer or something, which changed the flight characteristics and made you'd haul a lot more weight in it or people in it. But they're kind of neat airplanes, though, in their own way. That amphibious airplanes were interesting. It's something we just don't think about so much anymore.
Right. Yeah, they are. The first time that I ever saw one was again at Oshkosh. If it flies, it's up at Oshkosh.
Oh yeah,
during the week. Military aircraft, everything, and a lot of the CBs they end up.
That thought, Pearl. I got to ask you another question about that. Okay, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
They end up in the antique section, and the antique classic section of Oshkosh is about a mile long. So you'll see pretty much anything and everything from the 1920s all the way up to, I want to say, the 1970. You'll see in that section, and the CBs they tend to gather in a certain area, just like the Cessna 195s gather in an area, and the Piper Cubs gather in an area. And
that's a cool little airplane.
Oh yeah.
Hey, speaking of that, this is another thing that got me into aviation. Is there anybody in this room besides me and maybe? No, I'm not even going to say anybody. Well, Tina maybe. Tina McNeil. She might, because we're about the same age. But does anybody else in this room remember the show Sky King? Chris, do you remember Sky King?
Yep.
Sky King flew around. He owned the Sky Ranch out somewhere. Can't remember where he was supposed to be, Nevada or someplace out there anyway, where it was pretty flat, or not flat, but dry. And he flew around in later shows. He flew around in what's called a 310 Cessna twin engine airplane. But before that, he flew around in what was called a T-50 Cessna, a bamboo. Some people called it a bamboo bomber. The bamboo bomber, yep. Which is actually, it has another designation in the military, but I can't remember what their number was. I don't think it was a C-50. I think it was something else. But that's another thing that got me hooked on flying and aviation was Sky King and his niece Penny. Penny was always running around getting in trouble doing something, and he had to fly in and rescue her. But he made flying look pretty glamorous and pretty easy, and he could just fly anywhere and land anywhere, and always catching the bad guy out of an airplane I thought was pretty cool. Okay, Pearl, back to your comment just a minute. Okay, scripts or vouchers. That's what I thought, Tina. That's what I remember. Let me back up here. Do you have any idea what kind of bombers he flew in the Pacific, Pearl? I mean, I'm thinking out of New Zealand. He either flew short range stuff to the islands hopping, or he flew B-29s because they flew B-29s out there because they could cover a lot of distance. Which leads me to another story that I've always found fascinating. It's not the most pleasant of thoughts, but okay, B-29s. Well, that would be cool, Pearl. I've only met one guy that ever had anything to do with B-29s that I know of, and I walked into him, and I'll try to make this not too long. Of course, everybody that knows me knows that's probably not going to happen. I walked into a BMW. I walked into a BMW motorcycle shop down in Shelbyville, Tennessee, or if you're from there, Shelbyville, Tennessee. And I can't remember the guy's name right offhand at this minute, but he had owned this BMW shop for quite a long time, and was probably the first BMW shop I'd ever been in. Yes, Shelley, I have heard of that, actually. I don't know much about it, but I have heard of it. Chris may know more about it. But anyway, when I went into this guy's shop with a friend of mine, we were looking at bikes. I think he was looking to buy one at the time. And on the wall, when you went into the shop, were these pictures of some B-29s hanging up. And so we got to talking to him about it. And the guy that owned the shop was there, and he flew one of them. or didn't fly one of them. He flew in one of them. And he was a photographer, or at least he was this day. He followed the Enola Gay in when they dropped the first atomic bomb, and it was their job as a chase plane to document it. So they actually, and nobody knew what was really going to happen. Well, somebody knew, but the pilots and stuff really didn't know how catastrophic and huge this was going to be. So they were like, I don't know, they were behind them by a certain amount of time, 20 minutes maybe, or something. But anyway, they were following them, but not right with them, because their job was to wait for the blast and then fly over and see what happened. And he said what he remembered was I think they made them put on they may have even had a lead suit on. I'm not sure about that part, but they made them put these really dark goggles on. And again, they didn't know why, but they said, you got to put these on, and probably still shouldn't look directly at it. But he actually saw the first atomic bomb go off over Hiroshima, and their job was to photograph it, document the damage, see what happened. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you I think that's a great story or anything glorified about it. I think it's probably a horrific thing. I mean, we let the genie out of the bottle that day. We've never been able to put back in, and probably never will. And I don't know if I can even express how I would feel about that, but anyway, he was there, and I found that quite fascinating. And he was there taking pictures, and he told us more about it that I probably don't remember right now, but he was in a B-29 following the Enola Gay B-29 when they dropped that first bomb.
I think eventually, had it not happened, well, first of all, the outcome of the war would have been very different.
I think, yeah, well, probably.
But
at least
eventually somebody would have found out how to create the atomic, just an atomic bomb or an explosion. Because after the war, well, actually during the war, a lot of the scientists, they were split. They were split up between the scientists that we have from Germany. The United Kingdom, they had scientists from Germany, and the Russians, they had scientists from Germany. I really believe that eventually somebody would have found out on how to create that atomic energy that would come out to be such a large explosion. So eventually somebody would have come up with it.
Well, I mean, over time they figured out that Hitler was probably closer than we ever imagined.
Oh, yes.
And
luckily VE Day came before any of that came about.
But anyway, yeah, I agree with you, Pearl. I do believe that. I think history, and that's what bothers me about so many people today, young people or people younger than me, or they don't care about it. I know a lot of people my age, for that matter, didn't really like to learn about history, but I believe in the old saying that, if you don't learn your history, you're just doomed to repeat it.
Doomed to repeat it. So, yep.
And I think stories like that do need to be told because they're not pleasant, not glorified, not heap praise upon or anything, but people need to know what happened. People need to know what happened in the Holocaust. They need to know what happened when they dropped the atomic bomb, and there was nothing pretty about that.
Well, like the CAF, not the CAF Commemorative Air Force, they have a program called Tora Tora Tora, and the whole way of telling that is not only what happened during Pearl Harbor, but trying to prevent it from happening again. So that's sort of the behind the scenes part, or the major part of the Tora 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 air show segment. Towards the end, they say, America came back alive after that, but also they didn't want something like that to happen again. Of course, something did happen like that again. I won't get into that, but it's sort of kind of a be alert type deal,
Yeah.
and we shouldn't try and let um, other countries try and attack us, basically. So they tell that story, and it's told in such an interesting way that sometimes people can't believe it. You know,
No.
when people see it during the air show, and there's stories out there of pilots who Japanese pilots who had survived, and they told their story about Pearl Harbor and how everything was planned, how everything came about. Um, and there are stories that were told from various Americans who were in the attack. Not only pilots, but civilians have told their side of what they saw.
Mm-hmm.
So
I had another friend who was actually he was a NATO guy, and I knew him. I didn't know him from aviation. I knew him from being involved with muzzleloaders and historical reenactments. I was into that too for a long time, and I still enjoy that. Pearl, again, hold that thought.
Hi, Dean.
Anyway, and he was in World War II, and he was on what they called a jeep carrier. You know, the little carriers they built to basically transport, you know, warbirds out to the ship, the big carriers and stuff. And they were kind of just used to haul stuff, but I guess they could fly off of them, or I don't know if they really landed on them. But anyway, you probably know what I'm talking about, Chris. But anyway, they were smaller carriers than the big fighting carriers that we had. But anyway, he was on a jeep carrier when they dropped the bombs, and he was over near Japan. And I think he fought in some of the battles that they had involved with the kamikaze pilots and whatnot. But
Right.
his big job ended up being he was stationed in I think Hiroshima. It could have been Nagasaki or Hiroshima or how it's pronounced. As a MP, basically, as soon as the war was over, you know, we occupied Japan, and he was over there in one of those two cities. And I often wondered what they told them about that, because he told me that he was on the ground there in less than 2 weeks' time after that happened. And of course, he lived to be in his 70s at least, I think. But I often wondered how many guys did do that kind of work and that kind of duty, and if they, you know, had radiation poisoning from it or had ramifications down the road. Because again, the Japanese civilians suffered from that for decades afterwards.
Well, it's interesting. One of the gentlemen who had studied the effects of the atomic bomb, and I'm sure you talk about or you've heard about on the Weather Channel the Fujita scale, or the enhanced Fujita scale. Now it's the strength of a tornado. Professor Fujita was one of the men who went into Hiroshima and Nagasaki afterwards with, because he was a Japanese American professor. He went in and he studied the effects of the atomic bombs.
Mm.
And after that, he went on to become involved with weather. And that's how the Fujita scale came about, because of Professor Fujita. He a great gentleman, really nice guy. I met him once. He did of course, I was very quite young at that age, but
Well, that is interesting. I didn't realize, you know, that he was involved in that kind of stuff.
yeah.
I just knew the name. I didn't know anything about him. So,
Shelley, I saw that SF-71 fly over Oshkosh back in 1997. They were going to, because it was going to be the anniversary of the sound barrier being broken, They were going to fly over Lake. I think they were going to fly over Lake Winnebago or Lake Michigan, most likely, at 80,000 feet, and they were going to break the sound barrier for us. Unfortunately, they had to make an emergency landing because something was going on with one of the engines, and they had to make an emergency landing in Milwaukee. But yeah, the SR-71B is a really interesting aircraft. And they actually used it not only for training, but they also used it. You know how the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, how they'll take up somebody like a celebrity or somebody who did a really good thing for whatever city they're visiting. They used the SR-71B for the same thing. They would take up, but it was very, very rare that they would
I
do that
bet.
because it was so expensive to fly the SR-71.
Amazing airplane. I mean,
Oh
it's.
yes.
I don't know anybody that was in aviation or has been in aviation that cared about it other than it being just a job that doesn't drool all over the idea of an SR-71. What always amazed me, and I was around when they were. I mean, I wasn't around where they were flying them, but I knew guys that had worked on them or talked about them a little bit in the Air Force when I was in A&P school. And what blew me away was when I first learned that they were actually designed in the late 50s or mid 50s, somewhere along in there is when they first started drawing that thing up. And
Oh yeah. Yep.
wow, what an amazing airplane. I mean, it would, I don't know what the final top speed, I'm not sure they've ever really told, but I know it's over Mach 3, which is 3 times the speed of sound.
I believe it was like Mach 3.5, and the height record. Now some pilots have claimed that they've gone above 82,000. The official record is 82,000 feet,
I'm
but
pretty sure they've gone higher than that.
some pilots have claimed that they've gone to 90,000 feet, but that's sort of an unofficial, it's sort of a top secret about how high they could go.
Yeah, and it's not even an active airplane, but they still keep some of that stuff secret about it. It's amazing. I
Yep.
knew a guy that was in the Air Force, and he was on base where they kept him out in Edwards, out in California. And he said you could always tell. He worked on some older stuff at that time. In fact, he worked on I think the C-119s flying boxcars had radial engines on them. He was working on stuff like that, and he said you could always tell when something was going on with them because a couple of things happened. One was the special fuel trucks showed up. I believe it was JP-7 or JP-8, and they were the only airplane that ever burned that fuel.
Yep.
And so those trucks would show up on the base, so you knew something was going on. If you knew anything about the airplane, you knew what it was. And they would vacuum the runways about every little bit. And again, that's because they actually vacuumed the runway before every flight of an SR-71 because they didn't want to pick up gravel, which would damage the wings or go through the engines and cause catastrophic damage. What I found really fascinating about that airplane was it was more than just an airplane. I mean, you might as well call it a rocket, because a rocket plane in many ways, because what was so special about that fuel was it not only had kerosene in it, or aviation jet fuel, but it also had an oxidizer. So it didn't need the air in the atmosphere to burn. It had its own oxidizer built into the fuel. So as that thing got higher and faster, the nose cone, which if you've ever seen one's got a really long, sharp nose cone in the center of the engine. As that thing got higher and faster, that nose cone got extended and the intake got smaller and smaller and smaller till it was literally closed off because they didn't need air coming in the front anymore. They could get the air through that fuel. And it was really a rocket. It turned into a rocket engine at that point.
Well, they also had a bypass as well. There was a bypass past the cone. That way it could get a little bit of air. But when you're at 8,000 feet, the air is so thin that the interesting thing about the fuel is, one, it doesn't easily catch fire. That was
it doesn't. Yeah.
Because when you're going Mach 3, that airplane heats up and it stretches big time. I think it stretches about another 8 inches, if I remember, 8 to 12
Something
inches.
like that.
I can't remember.
Sitting on the ground, they leak like a sieve. You pour fuel in it, and it starts running out on the ground. So
yeah,
they
they
fill it
didn't
up
have
right before it takes off.
right. They didn't have the self-sealing tanks, so they it would pretty much be full, and then by the time they got into the air, they had to. It depended on the mission. By the time they got into the air, if they were flying over, say, Russia, which it was most of their missions, they had to be refueled right away. And then they would go from that point and do their mission and come back, get refueled again. And so, yeah.
Yeah,
The
a
ironic
fascinating
thing,
airplane.
the ironic thing is the titanium on the SR-71 came from Russia.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So, you'd have the titanium coming from a place that your mission was to spy on.
Spy on, yeah.
Pictures from, yeah.
Yes, Tina, you're absolutely correct. That was what caused it. The speed, the friction of the air caused it to heat up. And that's why it leaked. They had to make it flexible. They had to make the airplane be able to stretch as it got hot. And it sealed the wing panels fit tighter, the rivets were tighter, all because of the air friction of the air and the heat causing the wings. And that's why it leaked on the ground. But once you got flying it and got it warmed up, it didn't leak anymore. But they never took off. The guy that I knew that was worked around them on the base said they took off not with necessarily a full load of fuel, that's not too unusual, but they would, as soon as they got up, they would refuel in the air to fill up and top them off.
Right.
And so they could, go the distance. I'm one more thing, and I'm going to skip to something else here. They did a special flight one time. Once they allowed people to know that, that airplane flew around for almost 20 years before we knew it existed. Only top secret level people and pilots and whatnot knew it even existed. But somewhere along the mid 70s, it became known that they had such an airplane. A lot of it was still top secret, but they wanted to kind of rattle their sabers or show off or whatever. And they flew an SR-71 from Edwards Air Force Base in California and did a perimeter. Let me get the finger going the right direction. They did a perimeter loop around the whole country. They left Edwards, flew like along the Canadian border down the East Coast and then along the southern part of the United States and back up to Edwards. And they did that entire loop in 4 hours or less than 4 hours. They had to refuel the airplanes 4 times, I think. And the interesting thing was the first refueling tankers had to take off several hours before the SR-71 did. And they caught up with them so quick, it was unbelievable. And the first set, they like every 2 hours they would stagger a couple more fuel tankers up and they would catch them fuel. And you got to realize that the other thing was they had to slow down and probably get down in altitude to refuel on these 707, or not 7, they didn't call them 707. What is it, Chris? C-50s? What was it?
The
KC-135. KC-135s, yeah. They had to slow down to get the fuel and then speed back up and go back to altitude. So when you think about that was a phenomenal task and a record that they set with that airplane.
And actually, the KC-135, they really had to push it at that time because the SR-71 was still going at quite a quick speed.
Yeah.
So compared to refueling, say, an F-16, where they're sort of cruising along, they were moving pretty quick for the SR-71 still. And it was very tricky because they were moving so quick to try and refuel the SR-71. But yeah, they had to slow it down way ahead of time, but pretty far behind the KC-135. They had to slow it down big time and drop slowly drop to the altitude where the KC-135 was flying in.
Pearl, I hope you're still in here. I was going to come back to you on that, what you were saying a minute ago, and I apologize. I wasn't trying to ignore you again, but I think you're making a very good point about sometimes it's hard to write stuff that's, especially if it's personal, but I think it's also important that people do know what, this might be overly dramatic, but what darkness lurks in the hearts of men or people in general. And I think they do need to know stuff like that, because in the long run, I do think that will hopefully help the future and build a better future. And Pearl, if you just pop back in, I'm talking about you. So, but you know, I'm interested when you get written. I'd love to edit it, or not edit it. I won't proclaim to be an editor, but to follow up and read your book when it comes out or when you get finished with it. Yes, Shelley, there is a lot of history up that way, and it's partly because there's so many naval air bases and stuff around the Great Lakes, and they did a lot of flying up there for, I guess, that reason and maybe some others. Yeah, Pearl, we too quickly keep secrets and too readily keep secrets, especially family secrets that people don't want to know about, or we don't want to tell about, or, you know, something along that line. So that's the kind of stuff that, you know, families hide, push in the closet, if you will. That's probably an overused cliche, but, you know, we all got, there was a lot of skeletons in a lot of closets because they never talked about it. And it just gets harder and harder the further along you go and don't talk about it. I don't know if we're losing everybody or if people are just popping in and out, but I don't know who's here. One thing says 7. Oh, maybe that's not right up there. But anyway.
Well, we could switch it up a little if you still have time.
I can stay around for a little bit longer, and if anybody wants to, if you guys are really done, then if you're through and bored to tears and want to go, I certainly can feel like Chris. We can hang around for a little bit if you want to, but
yeah,
or I'll stay another 30 minutes. It's going on. Where's my clock?
I was going to mention
noon, so.
I was going to mention one funny story that you have to check out, and actually, it's a couple different videos on YouTube. It's called the LA Speed Check, and it talks about there's a Cessna that's asking.
I just learned how to do that, Pearl. Now I feel like I've accomplished something. I really accomplished something today. I learned another trick. I didn't know. I'm sorry, Chris. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I get excited.
No, that's okay.
I just learned how to put chat things in the window. Sorry, people. I get excited about little things. Anyway, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, it talks about a Cessna asking for a speed check.
Oh, yes.
To their traffic control, and then a twin asked for a speed check, kind of show them up. And then an F-18 says, "Well, I'll show you. You know, I'm in the Navy and I'm flying a fast jet." So then he would ask a speed check, and he thought that he was the top dog flying around, and then the SR-71 pilot comes along, and he's got a little grin on his face, and he asks air control, "Okay, speed check," and he told him, "Yeah, you're going 1,000 some odd miles," And he said, "Well, actually, my airspeed indicator shows this much." It's kind of a funny story, but
pilots are. They got to wear big watches or big belt buckles or something. They got to have something big. But that's if you don't know what a speed check was, that was a way you could check your airspeed indicator. So, you could call the radar or the tower and say, "What are you showing me as speed?" And they could say you're doing 120 knots, and But these guys want, if they want to show off a little bit, the faster they go, the more they get to get bragging rights. But you don't, if there's an SR-71 in there, you're not going to win. You're just not. It's not going to happen.
I'll change it up a little bit. Any bear sightings or any good bear stories lately?
I haven't in the last little bit. I kind of start listening. This is the time of year when they start getting more active around here. We usually think about bears hibernating in the winter, and bears further north do hibernate in the winter, and they're amazing. They're an amazing species biologically. The things their body can do in order to shut down for the winter are amazing. In fact, they're studying them now in different places because they can slow their heartbeat and their respiration down to almost nothing. They can stop or slow down their digestive tract to they don't have to, get out of their tree and go to the bathroom all winter if that's the case. I mean, can you imagine that? Waiting all winter to get up and go, take a leak or the other?
I would be. I'd be dancing around.
But yeah, to say the least. But in this part of the country, the females tend to. Well, first off, around here, most of the females tend to get up in trees, and if there's a hollow in the tree, that's where they'll spend the winter. And they can get down in some of the darndest places. It's amazing. I went to school with a bunch of guys that worked on black bear studies, and that was what they're. Well, we had a professor here. It was one of the world acknowledged leaders in black bear research, and partly because of the Great Smoky Mountains, they had a ready place to, learn. But the females would get down in these trees, and that's where they found most of them. We're always down in these hollows, and that's where they'll have their young, if they have young, and they'll give birth to one or two of these little teeny tiny bear cubs that have no hair and look like a one of those naked rats at Disney World or something.
Right.
And of course, they'll grow to be, size of Teddy in time to come out of the tree. But the females pretty much stay in the tree all winter until it's time to come down. But the males or the boars, and male bears are called boars and females are called sows, like a pig. Not sure where that came from, but it's one of those quirks of naming wild animals. But the boars actually don't do that. They'll find a place and they'll curl up, and they may just be buried in a pile of leaves, or they may crawl under a ledge of rock, or it may be getting a cave or something, or crawl up in a hollow log laying on the ground or something. But they tend to wake up during the winter and get stuff to eat. They'll wander around. They can't find anything. They'll go back to bed somewhere, but they don't really hibernate all winter like they do further north. And so now is the time of year when they really start coming. They probably have been out for a little while, but the females will come out, and what they usually eat, imagine this, is grass. Most bears, if they do come out of hibernation, the first thing they want to do is load up on grassy greens and fiber, perhaps, to start the whole system running again, and which they need to do by then, of course. And they put on a lot of weight in the fall. They love berries. They eat mast. Of course, they'll eat about anything if you give it to them, but they love berries and cherries and that sort of stuff that grow in the wild, grapes, and other things like that in the fall. And they do eat carrion and stuff most of the time. Black bears don't really catch a lot of animals to eat, other animals to eat, but they will certainly eat something if they get a chance to. But mostly what they eat is different kinds of vegetables and fruit. You can go in the Great Smoky Mountains at the right time of year, and the wild cherries will be in the trees. And if you look up, there might be 3 or 4 black bears up in the top of that tree, just picking berries off right and left, trying to fill up. And they'll actually gain, 50 to 200 pounds. I mean, if they find enough blackberries and wild cherries and all that kind of stuff to eat, they'll gain a lot of weight. And you can see them sometimes in the late fall. They'll just be slick and fat looking. I mean, you can tell they're getting ready for hibernation. And of course, when they come out in the spring, if they do sleep all winter, they're a lot skinnier and a lot, but anyway, so they're out now doing that kind of stuff, and they'll probably have their young out wandering around it. They'll get going pretty good because it's warming up here, and the greenery's out now. Most places, at high mountains, it's probably still not as much, but most everything's turning green, and so they'll be out pretty soon. I haven't really heard any stories lately about anything major that's happened.
Did
Go ahead.
you see the story about the black bear chasing the gentleman down on the bicycle the other day?
Oh, well, I saw one. I saw a guy that was he on a bicycle or running?
He was on a bike, I believe. It looked
I
like
may not have seen that
he
one.
was on a bike on the trail, and
Yeah.
actually, it looked like a juvenile black bear. It didn't look like an adult. It was still fairly small.
Well, I bet you do, T. Marie, because Michigan's got quite a few black bears, and of course, Canada's got a lot of black bears. Maybe not immediately above you because it's a little bit more developed. But here's the thing about black bears: they're just like some other species, raccoons, deer, coyotes. They're very adaptable. And so once, we moved them out and displaced them a lot of times, but now a lot of them are rebounding and they're back where we are. And, so I don't doubt that you have bears up your way at all. And I'm surprised if you don't see some, I guess, unless you're really near. Well, you're not in Michigan. You're in New York, sorry. But you still have them. Yes, I'm thinking Michigan. But yes, in upper New York, I'm sure has plenty.
Like the Great Outdoors.
Do what?
The movie The Great Outdoors.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Funny movie.
It is.
But yeah, we have them here. I mean, we didn't used to hear about bears locally much. I mean, they were in the mountains and they were in the Smokies, and they were in places like that. And we used to run into them sometimes when we'd be hunting up in the mountains, up in the upper end of the state where I grew up. Sometimes a friend of mine crawled through some honeysuckle, or not honeysuckle, mountain laurel one day, on his hands and knees, and when he got through the bush and he looked up, there was a black bear looking at him nose to nose. He said he just sort of froze, and the bear sort of froze, and the bear went woof, and then ran off the other direction. So he said, he was about to, soil his knickers, if you will, but the bear took off the other way. He was probably just as scared. We used to run into them like that and stuff sometimes, and never had any bad experiences. But they weren't everywhere. Well, there's a lady that I worked with that just lived a couple of miles up the street here, right here in town. I mean, I'm in the suburbs of Knoxville, but it's still town. All the main roads have shopping centers and grocery stores and malls, and something was going on in her backyard one day, and she looked out, and there was a bear in her backyard, which was a fenced-in backyard. And I guess when she went out and it saw her, or whatever was going on, the bear ran to a corner and climbed up her fence and went over the backside and took off somewhere down in the brambles behind her house. And
it's interesting. They become curious.
Oh, I'm sure. And it was probably, this one was fairly, I saw a picture of it. It wasn't very big. Probably looking for something to eat. I mean, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
But they're here. I mean, they're around. And
right.
So bears do get, they also learned that they used to move bears. If you had a bear that was giving people trouble, such as in the park and the picnic area, and people started feeding the bear people food, which is the absolute worst thing you can ever do to a bear.
No. Yep.
I mean, a wild bear, because once they learn to eat human food, they'll come forward every time, and a lot of times they have to be euthanized.
Right.
Not to mention the fact that some of it's probably not good for them. I mean, it ain't good for us, so it's probably not good for them.
Right.
But I mean, I'm a good one to talk, but But anyway, they used to move them. They'd catch a bear. If they had a bear in a picnic ground, a lot of times they would catch it and move it and put it in some remote part of the park. And they still do that some. But what they usually find is the bear just comes right back. And they actually moved some from the Smokies up into the Cumberlands, which is across the valley where I live now. and they were probably 100, 150 miles away in cases, and they actually tracked some of them. They were coming back from the Cumberlands, going back through the valley and heading back to the Smokies. They knew where they were going. They knew they weren't home and they were headed home. So, they're pretty smart in that way too.
Oh, yeah.
So they don't relocate them a lot of times anymore because it just really doesn't work.
That, and I mentioned it before to you, the gentleman in West Virginia who has kind of an open fence or a non-fence sanctuary for black bears, and there was one that he named Rose. She will go back to his property to have the cubs, and she goes out on her own, but she knows where to return after the summer for to have a safe spot for the winter. She will return to his property every year and will have the cubs there.
I'm not surprised, honestly. They do things like that people don't realize that there's that smart. And
right,
Carol, I wouldn't swear there's no bears. Well, I don't know where you live exactly. I know it's Michigan, but I wouldn't swear there's none around. You just haven't seen one yet, unless you're living right down New York in Detroit or something. There probably aren't any there, but they're out there. They just staying away from where you at.
We have bears in Chicago, but they aren't doing all that well in the NFL. So,
well, they didn't last year anyway.
Right.
It's been a couple years since they had a good season, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
But, we have somebody mentioned. I saw something about a bear. Yeah, Shelley's talking about a bear ranch in Upper Penn or UP. We have a bear rehab center not too far from here, and they take in orphan bears, which is another story. Injured bears that maybe get hit by a car crossing the road and that sort of thing. But they take them in with the purpose of releasing them, if at all possible.
Kind of a rehabilitation type.
Yeah, it's more of a rehab center than a not. So they try not to habituate the bears to people. They try not to let them see them feeding them and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of the orphan bears that people bring in aren't orphaned at all. They just don't realize that the mother's around. That probably happens more with deer. People are all the time picking up fawns that they find laying in a field or in their yard, and they think it must be orphaned because mom's not there. And really and truly, mom probably put it there to hide it because it was safer there than it was somewhere she was going. And then, of course, the fawn comes back or the doe comes back and the fawn's gone. People do that a lot, unfortunately. Anything that's small and looks like a baby, people think must be lost or hurt, or, mom's gotten killed like Bambi's mom or something. And a lot of times that's not the case. And that happens with black bears, too. People find bear cubs that are probably not really lost or missing, but they don't see a mother. And if she happens to have wandered off far enough, they might pick the cub up and take it home.
Right.
Or take it to somebody, the state agency to, I found this orphan bear. And, where'd you find it? Well, he was laying up there in a tree by the so-and-so. And he said, did you see another bear? No, we're sure it's orphan. Of course it's not, but, by then they've got to do something with it. So they take it to the rehab center and they get it, nurse it up to a point where they can release it. Most bear cubs stay with the mother for 2 years or in the neighborhood of 2 years. And then they'll breed again and have another, if everything's going well, they'll breed again and have another one, or two, or even three. I have seen singles, twins, and triplets in the park in the Smokies before. I had a mother and three cubs walk right by me one day when I was up in the Smokies. It was, I'd seen twins. Twins aren't that unusual, but triplets means things are going pretty well. And there have been quadruplets, but I've never seen a set of quads. But it's they're out there. The Smokies has a real high concentration. But black bears are all over the country. Really, they're in Florida. They're along the Gulf Coast. We had research teams in Mississippi, or the university did, in Mississippi, in Florida, the East Coast along the Dismal Swamp area. One of the biggest bears ever found was actually taken over along the Dismal Swamp area of North Carolina. And they think it was so big because they think it'd been eating. There are a lot of pig farms over that way. And they think it'd been eating pig carcasses they found off these farms where the farmers would, bury them if they had one die or something, or got killed or drowned from a flood, which happened a couple of times. The bears would find them and they'd feed, as they used to say, high on the hog.
Right.
And, this bear was over 800 pounds, which for a black bear, that's a whopper. I mean, the biggest one I've ever seen was probably 4 something, and that was a big bear.
That's pushing more towards the grizzly area.
Grizzly size, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So he was a big boy, but but they're interesting because they are pretty much all over the country. I mean, they're in grizzly country. They cohabitate, and the other interesting story, somebody just said something about coyotes. Coyotes are now all over the country, which is really odd because coyotes didn't used to be in the East, or at least we don't think they were. They haven't been since the East was settled. But what we did have was the red wolf. And so a lot of biologists think that the red wolves in the East kind of kept the coyotes west of the Mississippi. But then once the red wolf was extinct or near extinction, and the coyotes could easily cross the Mississippi on the the Memphis bridge or whatever, or any number of bridges, because they certainly will, then they started moving east, and they've pretty much covered every state in the union now. I think maybe not positive about Alaska, but I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, the Indians, the Native Americans used to say the last 2 creatures on earth would be the crow or the raven and the coyote. They always thought those 2 animals would outsmart everybody else. So I saw something else here. Shelley's asking how many eggs would be in these 2 ostriches. That depends, Shelley. They probably anywhere from 1 to 3, maybe even 4 or 5, but usually they don't all hatch. If you see 3 in the nest, that's a pretty good clutch. And if all 3 of those live to fly and hack and leave the nest, that's a pretty good lick. A lot of birds of prey that have 3, one is usually a bit of a runt. Usually the last one that hatches out smaller than the other 2, and they generally get out competed for food that the parents bring to the nest.
Right.
And that 3rd one oftentimes doesn't survive. So usually you get 2 healthy birds out of a nest. But now if they're in the right place and there's no pressure and there's plenty to eat, they can do 3. I don't know if I've ever seen 4. They used to count eggs and stuff down here near where I was on one of the reservoirs we had, and that's kind of what they lost that train of thought. Oh, that's kind of what they were finding.
I've seen
so
that
I don't know
bald eagles as well. As far as they could have 2 eaglets, and the smaller of the 2 tends to not make it, but it all depends.
Yeah, and a lot of birds of prey, raptors are like that. Owls, hawks, eagles, they just I'm not sure. That's just how they work. I mean, if there's plentiful food and there's all that, they may all 3 make it. But if there's not, they generally lose at least one of them, and sometimes they'll just literally knock the little one out of the nest. But I'd say that's what you'll find, Shelley. Keep an eye on them if you're able to see the 2 that you're watching or that have eggs in them or expect to, or a suspect they will. Tell me how many that you can see in there, because usually once ospreys hatch, you can usually see their heads popped up a lot. Yes, they do tend to hatch staggered. That's correct, Shelley. They don't. That kind of bird species are the raptors and owls. Well, owls are raptors technically. They do stagger. It could be a day or even a couple of days apart sometimes. Whereas smaller birds tend to hatch out, or ducks tend to, once they start hatching, they all just kind of keep hatching out till they're all out.
Fastest bird in the world, Tina.
She talking about peregrines.
Yep.
Yeah, peregrines are cool. Peregrines were just about gone too in this country, and they've made a great comeback. I used to go in the Spokies, and there was a pair that used to nest on a ridge every year across from what's called Allen Bluff Cave, and we went up there a couple times and watched those peregrines. They're pretty neat, and we have some areas down here where they nest along bridge overpasses or over river bridges and stuff. Funny story: downtown Knoxville a few years ago had the Hilton Hotel had started complaining about something, and we had a birder who's written some books who actually worked for us that was in one of the office towers nearby where he worked out of, and he had spotted peregrine falcons in Knoxville, and we hadn't had any in Knoxville City at that point. This was at least 15 years ago, maybe more, and so that was a pretty big deal. He was kind of keeping an eye on it and watching them. I think there turned out to be a pair. But what was going on was the Hilton people started complaining because every morning or every day they'd go out to their front door where people were coming and going, and they would find parts of dead pigeons laying on the ground at the front step. Well, what they found out was the peregrines who were, catching the pigeons to eat them would land on the crossbar of the H of the Hilton. And that was right above the front door. So they would rip their heads off or whatever they would do as they were eating. And they'd drop the head and it laying right in the front door. So all their customers and their guests walking over the dead birds' heads every time they would come in the office.
Oh,
now,
wow.
They were really panicked about that at first because they said, oh, God, our customers and our clientele is going to hate this. It's gross, bloody bird head. And but it came out that it turned out to be a plus for them because most of the people, once they found out what was going on, really kind of got into it because peregrines in downtown Knoxville was not something we'd had before or that anybody could remember. And so it was pretty cool. I don't know if that pair is still nesting down there or not. I hadn't heard in the last couple of years, but that was pretty exciting when they came in. But, there's peregrines in a lot of big cities because they were cliff dwelling birds, and in nature they tend to grow on cliff faces and high up, and they found that the concrete canyons of the big cities can be pretty much just like a cliff face, and there's plenty of pigeons usually to eat and things like that. Peregrines pretty much they eat mainly birds. They don't eat mice and that sort of thing much. They probably do if they catch one. Mostly they eat other birds. And so they have plenty of pigeons to eat.
The Air Force Academy, they have a falconry class, and someone from the academy told me that they could take on geese. Something far larger than them. Because they dive at such a high speed.
Oh, when they hit a bird, the feathers fly.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
You'd think they'd been hit with buckshot. I mean, they just... So, yeah, I've seen them I know of them taking ducks, and which are actually much bigger than them, too. But, yeah, I don't doubt a bit they wouldn't take a goose, or try to, at least.
Right. Yeah. That would be interesting to see.
I mean, they go so fast. I can't remember what their terminal speed is, but it's well over 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, I think they were closer to their fastest speed was close to like 180 or 200.
It could be in a dive. I mean, they're the fastest animal alive, so that we know of. But yeah, when they hit a bird, feathers just boosh. It's just a big cloud of feathers. Quit that. If you want to be on the computer, on the internet, you get up here, but you don't pick your own cables. You can't hook up your microphone. I think he's trying to join in now, but he's trying to do it on his own terms. But
we were talking birds, so he wanted to jump in.
Yeah, that's true. It's probably true.
Yeah,
Tina, are you talking about falcons there too when you say you've got 4 eggs again this year? Now those birds, they do sometimes. The smaller hawks and things do tend to have more, or can have more. Usually the larger the birds, the less eggs. Well, not in the case of a turkey or a duck or a goose, but birds of prey, they tend to do that. But a smaller bird like a peregrine might have 3 or 4 youngs. But again, a lot of it depends on how much food they've got available. The more food available, the more likely they are to fledge off, 3 or 4 birds. Okay. Well, what other bird animal subject do I know something about? I was going to tell something about snakes, and I know nobody wants to hear about snakes, but
well, I wanted to say something about coyotes. It was
okay. Go ahead. Coyotes are a pretty fascinating story in themselves.
They are. Well, I talked to my father on the phone the other day. I mean, I talked to him pretty much 6 days a week on the phone. He was telling me he got up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he was sitting in the chair, and all of a sudden he noticed a coyote walking down the middle of the street in his town. He lives out in the country, but this coyote came into town. I thought, well, that's interesting because, I mean, I know sometimes they could be solitary and sometimes they could be in a pack. It all depends. But hearing that this coyote came into town and was walking down the middle of his street, I thought, okay, why would he do that at 2 o'clock in the morning? Obviously he was looking for food.
Oh, I guarantee you. And I'll tell you something else. You'd probably be surprised where they are. I've heard them here. I've actually heard them at night in places like I live in right now.
Oh,
in a patch of woods somewhere maybe a little bit isolated, you'll hear them yapping.
Oh yeah, and I love when they do that, when they have it's not really like a laugh, but it's sort of
yeah. Well, they sing. They kind of sing
way,
together.
Yes, that's it.
And talking about walking down the middle of the street, I've seen them in town too. And chances are, if he's walking down the street at 2 o'clock in the morning, you better have your cats in, because they will eat a domestic cat. They and a small dog. They probably will take your small dog or your domestic cat if they catch one.
They would, yes.
I mean, they don't really cull much if they can catch it for food.
Well, even in a pack, they'll try and go after livestock if they're
at times. Yeah,
yeah.
When they first started showing up back east or in this state, they got blamed a lot for dead livestock, calves and sheep and stuff like that. What they found was, in a lot of cases, in fact, in most cases at that time, was feral dogs that were turned loose by people. And some were actually not even turned loose. They were just running loose at night and whatnot. Pack of dogs is probably one of the worst things in the world for that sort of thing. I had a neighbor years ago when Brenda and I were first married. We had a little house out in the country. And one afternoon I was working a night shift, and I heard this awful commotion out behind the house. And I went back there, and there was a pack of dogs had this guy's dairy cattle cornered in the spring or a swampy area behind the house. And they were probably on the verge of killing one of them. And I went and got a rifle and ran them off. And but the problem with dogs is, and East Tennessee and this part of the country, it's probably another Appalachian cultural thing, unfortunately. And this probably happens everywhere, but I've seen it my whole life. People will get tired of a dog and they'll turn it loose somewhere. They'll take it out in the middle of the country and turn it loose. And I guess that started back in the time when people figured that some farmer would take the dog in, and they did. I mean, I've known people that found dogs and took them in and kept them. But if they don't, and the dogs run loose or run wild, they'll pack up because they're a natural pack animal, just like a wolf or a coyote. Right. And if the pack gets a little bit big, they can be pretty destructive, because the first problem is dogs have been domesticated. They're not afraid of man. They're humans. Humans you might scare one off by yelling and screaming or throwing something at him or firing a gun over his head. But all in all, he's not afraid of you like a wild animal is generally. And I knew some guys that bow hunted up in the mountains of Upper East Tennessee that literally got treed by a pack of dogs one time that had been turned loose, and where people were letting out, and they got pretty crazy.
And they don't understand, really.
No, they don't. But and people don't understand that either. They don't realize that dogs can go wild pretty quick in a pack, and they're not afraid of man. And once they get that wild, they're not afraid to come, steal food, or they know that humans mean food generally. I mean, bears learn that too. But I just in the parks, I know Yellowstone and Yosemite and here in the Smokies, if the rangers catch you leaving food in your car in the back seat or the front seat where they can be seen through the windows, a lot of times you'll get a fine. Or if you leave it sitting out in a cooler on a picnic table and you're not there with it, they'll fine you, because bears know what that stuff is, and they'll bust windows right out of a car to get to a picnic basket, just like Yogi. I mean, Yogi used to be kind of cute and funny in case you don't know, that was a cartoon, guys. Sorry for me. That was a cartoon when I was growing up, Yogi and Boo Boo.
Hey, Boo Boo.
Hey, Boo Boo. In Jellystone Park. But, they learn quickly where the food is and what, a cooler means food. And, but, other animals are that way too. They can pick up on that stuff pretty quick. And
well, and they have a very high sense of smell as well. What was it? One of the rules about hiking was you don't want any type of open food on you. If you're hiking, you got to make sure that if not in one Ziploc bag, you want to make sure you have it in 2 Ziploc bags, because they could smell that from quite a distance as far as bears go. Yeah.
That's right, Pearl, not your average bear. The
picnic basket.
The only bear I ever knew that wore a pork pie hat.
Yeah.
Who remembers Quick Draw McDraw? And his sidekick was Bubbaloo, the little burro. And end of every show every week, the Bubbaloo would fall off the stagecoach, and the money box or whatever they carried on the stagecoach would land on top of him or something. And Quick Draw McDraw would say, "You okay, Bubbaloo?" And he'd say, "It's all right, quick straw." And that was the end of that show. That was an oldie too. Such as what I grew up with, or some of us in the room may have grown up with. Mr. Ranger. Yeah, Mr. Ranger. Carol. And Humphrey the Bear was, Disney's answer to Yogi. And my kids used to love the Humphrey Bear cartoons. And there's I don't know how many they actually made. What was Audubon J. Woodlore, I think, was the Ranger's name in those cartoons. And Humphrey was always getting in trouble for not doing the regular bear stuff. He was always trying to get into Donald's honey beehives, or not wanting to catching the fish. I remember this one. He was catching the fish out of the stock pond, and the Ranger made him put them all back, and because they were for the guests, And but the one that got my kids was the one where the bears are having to pick up the paper. They're supposed to be cleaning up the park, as if. And Humphrey's walking along, take a stick, pick it, then in the bag, bump, bump. I can't remember how it went, but my kids used to love that cartoon, and they'd, sing the song and bump butts and do all that stuff. They were, it was pretty funny. Let's see, what time is it, Shelley? I see your note, and I think it's 12:13. I probably ought to get off here. I'd say everybody needs to get moving, get off the porch and get some things done. Well, you're getting some things done, Shelley. You're sitting here listening to me say stuff and tell tales, and you're learning something. I mean, this is an education you can't just buy anywhere.
That's right. That's right.
You've learned about airplanes. You've learned about bears. You've learned about coyotes. We've talked about osprey nests. I mean,
Falcons.
Falcons. You just never know what you're going to learn in this chat room. I'm telling you. Education of history. That's right. Both ways. And next week we'll study the chapter 36 in your history book. What really happened in World War One, or what really happened in the Civil War? But Chris, I appreciate you. I'm going to start shutting down. I think I've probably overstayed my welcome. And I know people have things to do, and I love y'all for being here, and I appreciate y'all coming and staying this long. And I've enjoyed the questions and the conversation going on. I don't mean to hog all the talking. I'd be glad that if anybody else wants to ever join in the conversation and get on the screen, I'd be glad for that. And feed your chickens. What kind of chickens you got, Jelly? You got any that lay green eggs? Oh, you're heading for the Youper. Anyway, I'm sorry. What were you going to say, Chris? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I was going to say it would be great. I will most likely join you next week if that's okay.
That's fine. If you feel up to it, but don't ever feel like you absolutely have to. I'm not going to hold you to that. I know some days you don't feel like it. I mean, some days I don't either. So. Yeah, that's in your mind, but I don't want you hurting yourself. I don't want you doing something you don't feel up to. I mean, I'll be honest. Some days I don't either. My hips are hurting so bad. Most days I don't really. And I didn't sleep hardly any last night, so I'm running on coffee right now. But I feel pretty good this morning. I'm not hurting too bad.
Well, and I know that the other day, not to go to like a serious side. The other day I had mentioned my departure from the community, from the Disney community. There are multiple reasons for that. One of the main reasons is my health. I'm sure everybody knows that I have many health issues going on right now. I also have quite a few other issues that are weighing pretty heavy on my mind. Just need to get through these health issues first. Basically to save my kidneys, which are, in the transplant kidney, which is all keeping me alive. They're kind of in trouble right now. So there's a lot that I have to go through in order to get there. Some of it not so great, but it has to be done. And there are family issues that I am dealing with, and I won't get into detail about that. But a lot of it is pretty heavy on my mind, and it's very stressful, and it's just things that I need to take care of. So
and you should.
I will be away. I mean, I'll be here for as many weekends as you would like me to be here, Tim.
And I'm always glad to have you. I just don't want you thinking you're obligated and maybe you don't feel like it and you come.
No,
you just have to tell me, and I understand, buddy. I don't have a problem either way. You're always welcome. But I just want you to take care of yourself. That's the main thing.
I'd never feel obligated.
Okay.
Yeah, I love being here. Just right now it's really difficult trying to jump in on streams, and I know that I have been trying to, and I haven't been able to make all of the Disney streams. Everybody in the community, I haven't been able to jump on. I've been trying to, but it's extremely difficult right now.
And if they don't understand, the hell with them. I mean, most of us understand. Just tell it like it is.
Yeah. So, eventually I'll come back around. I'm not sure how long I'll be away.
Well, you just take care of yourself. That's all we care about. I just want you to take care of yourself. We still got a lot of things to do in this life. I don't want to lose a buddy already. And I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying I want you to take care of yourself so we can go to some more air shows and see some things.
Right.
I'm going to be walking again one of these days. So
Exactly.
I mean, really walking, not just stumbling around here like I do.
And if not, hey, I'll get you one of those all-terrain scooters.
I was just telling somebody you'd mentioned that. I was telling my wife about that. You'd said something about getting one of those for your dad.
Yeah.
An all-terrain electric scooter.
Yeah. Oh, very much needed at Oshkosh, believe me. A lot of the grass where all these aircraft park, some of it's rolled, some of it isn't. It's you definitely need an all-terrain scooter if
yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
See, Pearl says she's got to hug your neck, so you just keep that in mind. You got that coming. I might not. I might give you a hug, but I'm not going to hug your neck like that.
Yeah.
You never know about me, though. I might.
A big bear hug.
A big bear hug, yeah. Somebody else did. Oh, I know. It's Steve. Steve's World Steve. He's a big hugger. Everybody used to give him a lot of heck because of that. But hey, that's just what you do.
I am too. Love giving hugs. That's just how I am. But yeah, I'm sure I can picture trying to walk up to Steve and saying, "Hey, Steve," and all of a sudden he'll just like tackle me or something.
Yeah, he's a big guy too, so he's going to win probably. Anyway,
that's what's going on now. So I figured I'd mention
all right.
it.
Well, I was gonna let you talk about it if you wanted to. I wasn't gonna push it, but I'm glad you did, and now probably even more people know. And
I'll try and keep in touch with a few people in the community, just kind of. And you're one of them, just kind of let you know how I'm doing and let you know health-wise what's going on, and
just keep me posted.
Oh yeah, always.
If you can't get out for it with, I make. Do what? I'm sorry. Say it again.
I said I'm gonna see you, or I'm gonna be here as many times as you'd like me to be here. So
well, we can handle that.
Yeah.
I want to get to an air show or two with you, so. I gotta meet James. I gotta meet James Ryan at front of the Disney Castle, in front of the statue, and then you and I got to get to an air show or two. So
maybe
we'll get there.
Maybe we'll go to Sun and Fun next year.
Yeah, maybe.
Or
been a long time since I've been to that.
A big adventure. You'd be in like aluminum and fabric.
Oh my God, I can't imagine. I would. I'd probably OD on that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm not trying to cut you off, buddy. I'm just going to start shutting this down. I know people need to go, and I probably need to too. I need to stretch a little bit. I'm starting to get a little bit hurting. So when I sit too long, I get a little bit of hip pain, and it's creeping down my leg right now. So I think I'm going to stretch that out.
I wish there was too, Shelly. I really do. Gotta have an orca.
Oh, an orca. Yeah, that would be cool. I don't know how people get those special emojis in their chats or if they've got, group chats, they come up with maybe we can get some. I'm online.
Right.
Hang on just a minute. I got Anyway, I think we'll call it a day, folks. I appreciate you being here. We've had a good time, a lot of conversation. I hope, like I said, I hope we haven't bored everybody to tears, but who knows? Maybe you picked up something. And if you want to ask a question, you're always welcome to send me an email or a Instagram. I need to post my email. I'm not know if my email's down below or not. I'll have to look at that and see. But, I check emails pretty regularly, not as regularly as I did when I was a working guy, but, kind of got over that a little bit. I'm getting better again. When I had to check emails every 5 minutes when I was working, it got, you get burned out on that stuff a little bit. Excuse me. Anyway, evidently it is time for me to go because I'm starting to lose my couth here. But anyway, like I said, hey, can you hear me, Chris?
Yeah, I could hear you.
Okay, I'll start saying, did I mute and not come back because it sounded. Anyway, you take care of yourself, buddy. Everybody in the chat, have a good Saturday, good Sunday. If you get out and run around today, be careful and be safe out there. If you're in weather, bad weather, I don't know if anybody's getting snow this weekend, but I know there's some other stuff scattered around the country. Just be safe. Yeah, it's right. Well, it's raining. It's been raining here most of the day, so
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to continue or what, but it probably will. I think it's supposed to be most of the day, and tomorrow's supposed to be better. So we'll see. But anyway, thank you all, and everybody have a good day. And I'm glad you're here. We'll see you again next week for another episode of Saturday Morning Shine. Goodbye. See you then, folks. Hang on a minute, Chris.